Hey, what's up? It's Conan, and today we're going to be talking about Survivor Season 42, and this is going to be a review of Episode 8. You know, it was definitely a controversial episode, and I wanted to give some of my thoughts on it. Sorry for the slightly delayed review. I've been a little bit sick, causing a really big divide in opinions between whether this was too much talk about race versus not, just perfect. Some people loved it, some people hated it. So what do I think about it? So first of all, for this video, I honestly think it's really great to just kind of look at what other people's thoughts are on the subject. And what other better place to look than Reddit? So one really good point that I felt like even Lindsay herself made in regards to this episode is she wrote this: Survivor is a game, yes, but Survivor has also historically been able to prove this social experiment is a microcosm of society. This is a major factor of why this game is so iconic. And I totally agree with this point, because in Survivor Season 1, one of the biggest things was that Richard Hatch was like a gay man and he was getting along with this old, super conservative guy, Rudy. And it was just a really cool microcosm of what the actual real world is like. And so when you introduce a lot of new players to the game, a lot more people of color because of the new racial diversity quota, I think these conversations that are coming out in the episode are only going to be a natural byproduct of the new change in the players that are there in the episode. And you can't really blame production for highlighting this, because this tribal was... this was definitely what happened at Tribal. Otherwise, there's no way they're going to be able to explain why both of them decided to play their idols. So they had to show it. In my opinion, I think they probably could have showed a little bit less of it, because the point was a little bit belabored. But at the same time, it is a really important topic. And I think sometimes a lot of people do need to hear what people really fully have to say. And I think one of the big things that people were concerned about is people were concerned about that Drea and Marianne, it seemed like they were calling the other people racist, but I don't think that was really the crux of their argument. I think the biggest thing for them is that, if they had one black person, two black people, and then finally a third black person out in a row, then it really establishes a pattern. And that subconsciously, as a black person growing up, you're probably exposed to things like that all the time. And obviously, I'm not somebody who has experienced this. I've experienced other things growing up as an Asian, but for black people, black people are always the first people to die in movies. They're often, not making it as far as other people, especially in Survivor. A lot of times they get booted off early, not all the time, but it definitely happens. And so it's just a narrative that they don't want to portray, is that as soon as it gets to the merge, it's one black person, second and third in a row. I can see why that's important to them. And the fact that they're voicing these concerns, it's not like production told them to talk about this. It was just something that was on their own minds and on their own conscience. And so they decided to talk about it. So in the end, I think maybe they didn't need to talk about it so much, but the fact that people are very uncomfortable with it, I think honestly is a good thing. I don't think it's gonna be good for the viewership, because I think a lot of people are not gonna want to keep watching after this, but it's an important discussion to have, and it's literally a reflection of what society is right now. I like some of these posts on Reddit. Survivor is a social game. Race is a social issue. Like it or not, they cannot be separated. And I totally agree with that. The biggest thing I took away from Tribal tonight, a picture of Jonathan and Drea hugging. And so it kind of reflects that through these conversations, they're able to at least slightly better understand each other. Jonathan's never going to know what Drea's experiencing. I'm never going to know what Drea's experiencing. But I felt empathy towards their situation, and I could understand why they felt the way that they did. Something I'm sick of in this sub: people are trying to invalidate Marianne and Drea's points and thoughts with some weird twisted gotchas. Well, what if instead of what actually happened in the show, it was two LGBT people or two Asian people who were on the jury first? No one would care. Like, stop that. That's not what happened. What happened was two black women saying that not only were the first two jury members black, but a third black person would be joining them that night unless they did something. Instead of listening to what they had to say, reflecting on their own biases, and moving on, people here are reacting defensively and trying to find any excuse under the sun to talk over the feelings of two black women. And I think that's a big point, is, this is literally their feelings. So their point was not to call people racist, but they felt like they had a duty to do something to change the narrative. And I like this: watching two strong black women stand up and use their voices to discuss something important about the disparities in the game of Survivor. Realizing this means you have to wade through racist dog whistles for the next month on the subreddit because people refuse to address racism and their own subconscious biases. Tori herself made this Instagram post talking about how she empathized with their situation and the feelings that they were expressing. And then there was a couple of good posts. This is not something that's new to Survivor. This is something that has been going on in Survivor for a long time, all the way back to 2002. And so here's Vesepia and Sean having a race conversation in 2002.
Even the fact that you and I are sitting here talking right now can be perceived as We're strategizing.
We're strategizing. Sometimes the game isn't necessarily fair because me and her are playing a whole nother mental game that they don't even know. That when you're a person of color and you're the only one, you have to play. And that's something they don't even have to worry about. See, everybody can just be themselves. We have to be ourselves, but then hold back a little bit. And on top of that,
so I think that totally reflects kind of what the contestants in Survivor Season 41 were dealing with. Definitely, you're representing yourself, but you're also representing all the other people in your racial minority. And so you feel like you have to play a little bit differently because of that. And then this was another really good one. Daniel Liu on being the only Asian guy on his tribe. And this really shows kind of some of the progress we've made from 2002 all the way to 2022, 20 years later.
Talk about friendships. Daniel, feeling any bond with any of these guys?
Well, the person I get along with the best is Matthew. He was born in Hong Kong, so he's probably more Chinese than I am. And he knows how to speak Chinese, so that's a definite plus. I'm different than anybody else. I'm one Asian guy versus 7 other white guys. Even though I was born and raised in the US, just even before I speak, I stand up from the rest, and sometimes that makes me an outcast.
That is completely false. I don't think for 1 second any of us said that we're going to treat Daniel any differently because his relatives are from a different country than our relatives may be from. We're all from different places and from different backgrounds, and we all realize that everybody's different, and that's what makes us unique.
So that one is a perfect one there. I did not watch that season, but apparently that guy, the guy who responded was Rob Cesternino, who has really been a huge person in the Survivor community now, and he has totally changed his viewpoints and definitely empathizes with Daniel a lot more in terms of his experience during that season. And I feel like you could just tell, like, probably this is something that people were thinking about and going through 20 years ago. It's not a new phenomenon. And you have that older white guy who was there who was like shaking his head and like not agreeing. And so right now what we're getting in 2022 is the same thing. They're just pushing it a little bit harder, and we're still getting those people who are shaking their head like disagreeing with this. But I think this is something that's naturally a part of our social fabric in the US. And so it's something, I don't really like watching it in Survivor because I watch Survivor for the gameplay and all that stuff. But when some of this stuff naturally comes up like this, I don't think it's wrong for the producers to showcase it, because that is what happened during the Tribal Council. So I next watched, Russell Hantz and Boo from Fiji discussing this episode, and they were discussing the race here. And I felt like they had a pretty good discussion about it, and they kind of were understanding of Drea and Marianne's viewpoints, even though they themselves said that they really didn't understand it themselves. And then some of the comments here. Thank you for speaking on this. My husband and I are just about done with the show. We hesitantly started watching 42 after the joke that 41 was. You could tell production learned their lesson and toned down the wokeness. You're 1,000% right, Russ. Couldn't agree with you more on this. How is it racist when she's reason one of those black cast members are over there? She played the victim card. I don't think she played the victim card. She played her idol to protect herself. So I don't think that's, this is like a legitimate feeling that she has. Love this video so much. 2 white males giving respectful commentary about race. So many white males are afraid to talk about this subject out of fear of being critiqued or canceled. And I respect that you were willing to address this issue while remaining very respectful of everyone's viewpoints. Well done, Russ and Boo. I totally agree with this guy. I am tired of all this race card playing on Survivor and other reality TV shows. Just have all white casts or all black casts or all gay casts. Like, oh my God, this person completely misses the whole point of the reason Survivor is even a thing. Why would you segregate things? You're like literally arguing for segregation again. That's just completely beyond backwards. Then no one can complain about being voted off because of race or sexual preference. Let them fight against each other without that option. Oh my God, this Ruthie Hudson person is definitely way off the mark here. This is another Survivor channel that I watch sometimes, Survivor Spencer. It's this like really young guy. He's got some conservative viewpoints, but some of these people are saying this, I honestly don't know how Survivor is going to survive this. I was actually rooting for Drea. I'm so disappointed the whole season is ruined for me, and I'm sure many other fans. When Drea pulled that at Tribal, we stopped watching. She is such a manipulative victim. What Drea did kind of was set a precedent for future episodes. Contestants are now going to be afraid to vote a black person off because it could be perceived as racism. It's actually pitiful that this is what Survivor has evolved into. And honestly, I think the whole reason that they played the way they did, Drea said multiple times that there are probably some subconscious biases for why black people tend to do worse in Survivor, and historically have done worse. But she kept mentioning over and over that this was not her blaming other people for being racist, and that she completely did not want to come across that way. And then Marianne specifically played her idol so that people couldn't say she was playing the race card and just taking advantage of that. So this is just very like slippery slope kind of arguments. Like contestants are now going to be afraid to vote off a black person. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think this is like a real lived experience that black people have. And so it's reasonable for them to be discussing it on a show like Survivor. All right, let's take a quick look at the ratings for this last episode. So viewer count was 5.722 million, which was actually the highest of this season. So we were having a steady uptick in that. I think after the reception to this episode, we're probably going to see a downward tick after that. But I think people are still invested in this season and the characters because the editing has been good. So I think it's still going to remain relatively high. Now I want to talk about my Survivor tier list. So this is the tier list that I had last week. So obviously we had Roxroy get voted out and Tori get voted out. Really not too many changes here for me. I still feel like Omar has the glistening winner's edit, almost too good to be true, which is a lot of people saying. Mike, for him, I would say a little bit lower for me. He's still like S or A tier. Lindsay, I think she had a good episode for sure. She was kind of strategizing and basically telling Jonathan that he was super dumb, and it was giving us a good light of her in terms of her strategic gameplay. Still don't know that very much about her, but I still think she's relatively high pick for kind of an under the radar winner. Drea, I still feel like is a B tier possible winner. Hai and Jonathan, both of them are pretty low for me. I don't think they have a great chance, either of them. Hai has had too many negative reactions. The whole way they edited him this episode, freaking out about the Romeo vote. You know what? I'm actually going to put him in D tier. I actually don't think he can win anymore. And then Jonathan strategizing so poorly. Also kind of put him in a bad light too. Maybe Hai and Jonathan are still C tier instead of D tier. They're both really low for me though, like very low. So let me think about this. Yeah, let's keep Hai in C tier because I think he still has more of a chance than Marianne and Romeo. Marianne, she probably has a little bit more of a chance than D tier at this current moment in time. But I think just the way they've edited her at this point, we haven't seen enough of her like good moments other than just being like a very likable person in the first couple episodes. But I don't think she's a winner tier candidate at this point. Same with Romeo. So I'm going to keep both of them in the D tier for now. So that's it for this week. Gonna watch tomorrow's episode. Really excited to see that and see what happens in tomorrow's episode. I know one thing that people are really worried about is the do or die twist that might happen in the next episode or two. Hopefully that's not something that ends up being super disastrous because otherwise the season has been really good. Those are a couple of my thoughts about this episode. Let me know what you think, especially about the tribal council and all of the racial talk. Definitely curious to hear what you guys think about it. And thanks for watching. Sorry again for the stuffy nose. Still getting over this cold. But I'll see you in the next video. Peace.